Good morning. I will call to order the June 16th, 2023 meeting of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors and budget hearings for fiscal year 2023-2024 operating plan. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Supervisor Lavanino. Here. Supervisor Hartman.
Here.
Supervisor Capps.
Here.
Supervisor Nelson.
Here.
And Chair Williams.
Here. At this time, please stand and join the board in pledging allegiance to the flag. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item of business is the CEO's report.
Chair Williams, no report this morning.
Madam Clerk, are there any announcements or changes to our agenda today?
Chair Williams and members of the board, I do have a couple quick announcements this morning. I would like to note for those that intend to address the board during today's budget hearings, there will be an opportunity for public comment at the conclusion of each functional group presentation. If you are registering to provide verbal public comment through Zoom, please note which functional group you would like to speak on in your online registration. General public comment for today for items not on today's agenda will be at the conclusion of today's budget hearing schedule. Lastly, for the Board of Supervisors, methods of public participation and to provide public comment on general public comment or an item on the board's agenda, please see page 2 of the agenda. Individuals that would like to provide verbal public comment may do so via Zoom by registering in advance via the link available on page 2. If you have any questions, please contact the clerk of the board's office at area code 805-568-2240. Again, that number is area code 805-568-2240. That concludes my announcements this morning.
Thank you. Our first item is item number 1. Please present that resolution.
Chair Williams and members of the board, administrative item number 1 is sponsored by Supervisor Capps. It is to adopt a resolution proclaiming June 19th, 2023 as Juneteenth 2023 in Santa Barbara County. And joining us in person today, we have Diane Travis Teague and Dr. Charlotte Gallup Moore. And if you can please come to the podium. Are they here?
I'm not sure if they're here yet.
Great, and I will now turn it over to Supervisor Capps.
Thank you. Whereas news of the end of chattel slavery did not reach the frontier areas of the United States, in particular the state of Texas, until months after the conclusion of the Civil War, more than 2.5 years after President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on rebellious states on January 1st, 1863, and whereas Union troops led by General Gordon Granger entered Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, issuing General Order Number 3, which ordered enslaved African people in Texas to be free and stated that, quote, this involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former enslavers and enslaves. And whereas chattel slavery still continued in Union border states of Kentucky and Delaware, which was abolished by the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution in December of 1865. And now in 2023, due to the horrors of chattel slavery, African American, Black people have yet to achieve true equality and equity in American society. And whereas racism and white supremacy have tainted the foundation of America, beginning with chattel slavery in 1619 and the denial of the humanity of those enslaved by the authors of the Declaration of Independence, who declared, quote, all men are created equal, while holding men and women of African descent in slavery. And whereas systematic racism negatively impacts the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of over 10,000 Black residents and also negatively affects all residents of Santa Barbara County. And whereas we must address the harsh reality of racism and anti-Blackness in Santa Barbara County, intentionally work towards solutions and be the beacon of hope, shining light on how to mitigate the epidemic loss of Black lives in the United States, and condemn all actions carried out in the spirit of racism and all activities that sustain systemic racism. And Whereas Juneteenth allows us to celebrate the freeing of enslaved people, reflect on the condition of the lives of their descendants in our present day, and Juneteenth Santa Barbara calls to action all levels of government to commit ourselves to be anti-racist and combat anti-Blackness as we work to end systemic racism across our country. And now, therefore, it is hereby ordered and resolved that this County of Santa Barbara declares and celebrates June 19th, 2023 as Juneteenth and encourages all residents to use this time to learn about the legacy of Black peoples, their contributions, and stand in alliance to end racism, bigotry, and hate.
Mr. Chair, Board of Supervisors, good morning. On behalf of the Juneteenth Santa Barbara Committee, I am honored to accept this proclamation. Understanding our history is critical to the development of our understanding ourselves. Juneteenth, which celebrates the emancipation of enslaved peoples in the United States, is a time of remembrance and reflection. Thank you again for honoring this day. We look forward to seeing you at many of our events throughout the next week.
Is there any public comment?
Chair Williams and members of the board, we have no requests to speak on administrative item number 1.
We'll go to administrative, can I get a motion on administrative item number 1?
Move approval.
Is there a second? I'll second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Administrative item number 2.
Chair Williams and members of the board, administrative item number 2 is sponsored by Supervisor Capps. It is to adopt a resolution proclaiming the month of June 2023 as LGBTQ+ Pride Month 2023 in Santa Barbara County. And joining us in person today to receive this resolution, we have Kristen Flickinger. And if you can please come to the podium, and I will turn it over to Supervisor Capps.
Thank you to the clerk. Whereas Santa Barbara County is home to a diverse and vibrant lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer plus community, each June, the County of Santa Barbara honors the significant contributions, progress, and culture of the LGBTQ plus community and their allies bring to enhance our region that we may celebrate in pride. And whereas Pride Month was catalyzed by the Stonewall Uprising in New York City on June 28th through the July 3rd, 1969, creating a movement for LGBTQ plus civil rights, equality, and inclusion. And whereas LGBTQ plus individuals have risen above the challenges of their existence and equal rights, including the denial of the right to marry, discrimination in employment and housing, the inadequate response to the AIDS epidemic, the lack of protection from hate crimes, and marginalization in media and society. And whereas the LGBTQ plus Californians are now protected from many of these issues, challenges still remain, especially for LGBTQ plus ages, including LGBTQ plus elders, transgender, and gender nonconforming community members, and LGBTQ plus people of color. And the County of Santa Barbara stands against all forms of LGBTQ plus discrimination and hate. The County of Santa Barbara wants all LGBTQ plus people to know that they are valued members of our community. And whereas LGBTQ plus people have contributed greatly to Santa Barbara County, enhancing our community's culture and serving in influential roles in government, business, arts, and philanthropic sectors. And whereas for decades, LGBTQ plus communities have formed advocacy and support organizations to enhance the quality of life of LGBTQ plus Santa Barbara County residents, including the Pacific Pride Foundation, House of Pride and Equality, Santa Barbara Transgender Advocacy Network, PFLAG Santa Barbara, Pride and Joy Santa Barbara, Planned Parenthood of Central Coast, California Central Coast, and the UCSB Resource Center for Sexual and Gender Diversity. And Whereas the month of June is a time for reflection, celebration, and renewed hope for LGBTQ plus people and everyone in our community. The County of Santa Barbara takes this opportunity to provide awareness, support, and advocacy for the LGBTQ plus community, and is an additional opportunity to engage in dialogue to strengthen community, build acceptance, and advance equal rights. And now therefore be it, and hereby resolved, that this Board of Supervisors declare the month of June 2023 to be LGBTQ plus Pride Month in Santa Barbara County. And this board encourages all community members to commit to being good allies to members of our LGBTQ plus community.
Supervisor Capps, Chair Williams, rest of the Board of Supervisors, thank you. Good morning. My name is Kristen Flickinger. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Executive Director of Pacific Pride Foundation in Santa Barbara County. Simply thank you today. It is Pride Month. Happy Pride. As you mentioned in here, many of the parts of our community experience particular vulnerabilities. And if people can't see themselves reflected, they cannot see their futures. And that is very important. This today is, it's a proclamation, it's a resolution, it's something that says that you see and value our community. That is of critical importance, truly now more than ever. Hopefully this is a very seamless and easy meeting, which has not been everything we've experienced this year, surprisingly. And I sense that allyship is not new to all of you, but if it is, welcome to allyship. It is often not easy. It is very, very important. It is simply very important. And today, with today's resolution, what you have done is made sure that our community is reflected and seen, and that we know we are supported by our elected officials. I don't take that lightly or for granted. Thank you very, very much. I am grateful for your allyship and very proud to stand next to each and every one of you. Happy Pride.
Madam Clerk, is there any public comment?
Chair Williams and members of the board, we do have 7 requests to speak on this item.
Well, we have a budget hearing, so I will ask the speakers to keep to 2 minutes.
And
Please proceed.
we will begin on Zoom with Maria Mello, to be followed by Lynn Brown. Maria?
Hello, my name is Maria Mello. My pronouns are she and her. I am proud to serve at Pacific Pride Foundation as the Chief Programs Officer and to serve the LGBT community throughout the county. I just wanted to say that because my team and I work directly with the LGBT community every day, we recognize at this moment, this proclamation comes at a time where I'd say it's more important than ever. We have sensed the tension at different locations around the county, and we need all the support from everyone because it is a tense moment at the national level, and our LGBT kids, our youth, our professionals in the county, our older adults are definitely feeling the hate. So I think this is really important for us. And we really believe that together as LGBT communities and allies, we continue to stand strong, united, and committed to working with you all, with community partners, grassroots leaders, elected officials, private sector partners, and school boards to build inclusive, healthy, and thriving communities in Santa Barbara. We know we can't do this alone. but we continue to do it with all our community partners who have stood with us, and that we continue to stand with them as well. Thank you so much, and happy Pride.
We will now go to Lynn Brown to be followed by Cora Danielson. Lynn? And Lynn, we have unmuted you on our end. If you can please unmute on your end, and then you could begin your comments. There you go.
Sorry, rookie mistake there. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm an ally of the LGBTQ community, and I'm a person who has loved ones in that community. I also chair the board at PPF, and I simply today want to express my deepest gratitude to the county supervisors for proposing and approving this proclamation. It shows your support of a thriving community and a thriving LGBT community in our county and our region. Well, it just simply makes this a better place to live for everyone if we're inclusive of everyone. So again, thank you so much, especially during this time, for your support of the LGBT community. I'm in deepest gratitude of what you've done today. Happy Pride, and thank you so much.
We will now go to Cora Danielson to be followed by Carrie Tobes. Cora?
Hello, thank you. I am also here, my pronouns are she, her. I'm also here in support of the Pride Proclamation. I am the counseling program coordinator at Pacific Pride, and I see firsthand a lot of the trauma that LGBTQ plus folks come in with to our center to seek mental health counseling for. And I just want to say it's so important, as our executive director, Kristen, pointed out, it's so important that they see themselves represented in our community and see their futures there. That is so important to their mental health and their well-being. So thank you so much for supporting this proclamation, for supporting the LGBTQ plus community. And I also, I'm an ally and I have loved ones in this community, which is what inspired me to do this work. So thank you for your support.
We will now go to Carrie Tobes on Zoom, and then we will come to Santa Barbara for Ray Ibarra. Carrie?
Good morning. My name is Carrie Tobes. I use she, her pronouns, and I live and work in the city of Santa Barbara. As an LGBTQ plus ally and in support of my LGBTQ plus family members and friends, I'm speaking out to convey my support for today's Pride Proclamation. I'd like to express my gratitude to the county supervisors for this proclamation in support of our LGBTQ plus community, especially our transgendered and non-binary folks and people of color who are living at a very dangerous time where they're a target of increasing hate. The LGBTQ plus community and their allies are grateful for your support. We'll continue to stand strong and committed with you to working to make Santa Barbara a safe place for everyone, a place where diversity is embraced and celebrated. Thank you.
We will now come to Santa Barbara for Ray Ibarra to be followed by Jeanette DeGandhi. Ray.
Good morning, Chair Williams and members of the Santa Barbara County Board of Supervisors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As a step-parent of an adult gay man and a former crisis counselor, I believe that it is extremely important for elected officials and leaders in the community to express and demonstrate support for the LGBTQ community. In my years as a crisis counselor, I worked with many LGBTQ youth that felt frightened, abandoned, and isolated by the families in the community. With the recent increase in nationwide attacks on LGBTQ communities, it is vital to show that hate and ignorance is not what Santa Barbara County accepts or supports. Let's make Santa Barbara County a safe and inclusive community. Thank you for the opportunity.
We will now go to Jeanette DeGandhi to be followed by Kim Johnson, who is our final speaker. Jeanette?
First of all, thank you for letting me speak. I don't usually come to board meetings. I want to thank you for supporting diversity in this county. I actually am a retired educator and a mom. I've raised 3 sons. We've all gone through the Santa Barbara School District. And I will tell you that I just sort of like to testify that every student who came into my classroom, all that mattered was teaching kindness, character, and of course, education. I never banned a book or closed any avenue of exploration with my own children and with my students. And I feel confident that that's the right path. All 3 of my sons graduated from San Marcos, went on to UCLA and Stanford, and now have MDs and PhDs. And they are kind and generous and lovely human beings with a very diverse group of friends. And I now have young grandchildren who will follow in that path. And I think that is the hope for the future. So it worries me a little that people have forgotten that kindness and character are really all that matters. Thank you.
And we will now go to our final speaker, Kim Johnson. Kim?
Good morning. As a member of the Santa Barbara community, also as a homeowner, I am so pleased and honored that the county has decided to continue their support of the LGBTQ community. I want to thank you so much for your steadfast allyship, both now and into the future. It means a lot. Especially to folks who have multiple identities that sometimes are under attack. And it just really makes me happy to be in an environment where I feel supported, especially by those in positions of power. And I just want to let you know that your bravery, your integrity is seen, is appreciated, and we in the community will continue to stand by you as you continue to support us and support the beauty and the flourishing of Santa Barbara County. Thank you so much. Happy Pride.
And that concludes public comment on this item.
It's to the board. Can I get a motion?
Move approval of the resolution?
Okay. Can I get a second? Second by Lavanino. Mr. Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Williams. I voted for this resolution 2 years ago. Unfortunately, this issue at this time has been politicized on a national and local level. I believe in every one of our residents' rights to exercise their civil liberties and freedoms without discrimination. I absolutely condemn acts of violence upon this community or any other. You are seen and supported. I also reject the notion that some of those with differing opinions and beliefs are perpetuating hate and bigotry. Today, I will abstain from this resolution.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
That brings us to our budget hearing for the fiscal year 2023-24 operating plan. I'll turn it over to Mona Miyasate.
Thank you, Chair Williams and board members. Good morning. As you said, today we are presenting to you for adoption the recommended budget for next fiscal year 2023-24. Next slide. And the framework for today is I will give an overview. I will actually give an introduction, and our budget director will provide an overview. We'll talk about high-level summaries of the functional groups. Departments will give updates as needed or as requested. The board will deliberate, and at the end of the hearing, take recommended actions on the budget. And as you know, your board is required by law to adopt a balanced budget. And before we go to the next slide, I just want to say some thank yous. First to our auditor controller, Betsy Schaefer, and her staff. To Paul Clementi, our budget director, Nancy Anderson, our chief assistant county executive officer, and our entire budget team and CEO team. And mostly to all our department directors. And for those on Zoom or watching us, you don't see that all our department directors and their key staff are here today. So thank you to all of them, their fiscal officers, and their whole management staff for working with us throughout the year. and being fiscally responsible. But I also want to have a special recognition to some of our department directors for whom this will be their last budget hearing. They will still be in their seats for another 6 to 9 months, but I do want to recognize them and thank them. And that's Maria Elena de Guevara, our Human Resources Director, Joni Maiden, our Child Support Director, George Champion, our Community Services Director, and our longest tenured Department Director, Scott McGolfin. So thank you. I think I got Scott a little teary-eyed, so. Next slide, please. Our budget theme this year is Ready for Today, Preparing for Tomorrow, and it's to signify that we are ready to move ahead and are moving ahead with the board's highest priorities and continue to make progress on them, and I'll talk about them a little bit more. But this really is possible because your board has adopted fiscally sound budgets and have been prudent. And it's the result of years of setting aside funding and to ensure that we have a stable budgetary environment to weather all the different changes and uncertainty. But we're continuing also to prepare for tomorrow. As you know, that we are prone, like many California counties and throughout the country now, seeing disasters. There's the state just passed their budget, but as you know, they met their deadline, but there's a lot of budget bills that will follow after that. But state budget shortfalls, legislative changes, and lots of different uncertainty. But we know this budget sets aside ongoing funding to help with future deficits that we've already identified and to adapt and be prepared for unexpected disasters and other uncertainty in the environment. And as I said, like others, we remain challenged by this economic uncertainty and rising costs. We, like other organizations throughout the country, are seeing recruitment and retention of critical staff as an issue, and we continue to battle with deferred maintenance. And in April at the budget workshops, I did talk about the Anderson forecast and the uncertainty of a next recession. But the one hopeful news is that they've said that if we do have another recession, it would we would see more mild impacts compared to the recent years. The state budget had a budget shortfall, and as we know, the LAO, the Legislative Analyst's Office, had stated that if the legislature adopts the governor's budget, the state will likely face more budget problems over the next few years. And so since many of our programs in the county are funded by the state, we will be watchful of that. In our county, substantial revenue growth over this past year's adopted budget is anticipated, driven mainly by unanticipated property tax revenue in the current year and also expansions in some state programs. And as you know, cannabis tax revenue remains volatile, and we've tried to adapt and mitigate that. Next slide. But again, this budget reflects prudent planning. This is the 5th year that we have not had service level reductions. And it's, again, achieved through just prioritizing projects, planning, managing resources, and that's not just the CO's offset, it's all our departments, so thank you to them. Revenue growth and operational efficiencies have allowed departments to absorb some of these increasing costs. And we still have federal funding and other one-time funding that's being invested in critical programs and infrastructure. So again, this recommended budget includes funding to provide mandated and essential services, meet our obligations, address critical deferred maintenance and infrastructure, and adhere to the board's financial management policies. And also just to note that our reserves are strong, and the strategic reserve is fully funded at 8%, which is our target. Our key challenges that we face, obviously, we just talked about state mandates and regulations, and also the storms, the winter storms. We are still working on the recovery of some of those storms. They've created extensive damage throughout the county, and funding is required for cash flow and some local match of federal dollars. Recruitment and retention issues are getting better, but they are still having significant impacts on some of our departments. Several multi-year projects are great regarding technology, but it is taking a lot of staff, dedicated staff time. And as we've talked about in April, our insurance premiums continue to rise, with general liability and work comp costs increasing more than typical. But we do continue to make progress toward achieving key priorities and fulfilling commitments. Many times at the workshops or the hearings, we focus on what we can't fund because we don't have enough resources. And I just want to point out, there's a lot this budget funds thanks to your board's leadership and foresight. And these are things that we are not required by law to do in many cases, but it's things that the board has wanted to do. And so I just want to highlight there is a lot that we are doing and that the board and our departments and the public should be proud of. Addressing homelessness. For the last few years, we have invested more in addressing homelessness than we had in previous years. And this includes $46 million towards facilities, outreach, rental assistance, and encampment strategies. We're working on a workforce housing study and looking at how we can improve just not housing production, but for our local workforce. We're updating the inclusionary housing ordinance and continue to support affordable housing production. Regarding libraries and parks, as you saw through our CIP discussion a few weeks ago, we're improving and maintaining our parks, including Kachuma, Manning, Arroyo, and Lookout Park. The draft countywide rec plan is coming to the board, and we continue to fund the annual CPI growth in library, and we are going to be looking at how we can improve other library funding as the board directed us at the April workshops. Climate change adaptation. Your board said you wanted us to go all electric on the vehicles that we could and develop the infrastructure, and so we are. $1.5 million is going towards EV infrastructure projects that continued from the previous year. There's $2.5 in energy efficiency upgrades and through capital projects that you looked at a couple of weeks ago, and you'll be seeing the climate action plan at your board in a few weeks. We're continuing to support our safety net services in the county. We have ARPA funding that's budgeted for child care recovery and resiliency, and you saw that a couple of weeks ago. Digital literacy and senior meals. Social services. Recommended budget includes grant matches for the County Farm Worker Resource Center, for which we received a grant that your board encouraged us to apply for. And Be Well is implementing not just a new electronic health record system will help the efficiency of the department, but adding a co-response team and creating additional transitional units. We continue to focus on improving access to justice and diversion for a fair and efficient criminal justice system. We have funding to help structure looking at our IST population and improving that, working with multiple agencies on a felony IST work group. The public defender is launching an early representation pilot initiative to increase pre-arraignment access to counsel. An estimated $1.3 million is going to the digital evidence management system called DEMS that you heard about from Judge Ellsworth. And we're continuing to use Prop 170 money as set-asides in the recommended budget for criminal justice positions and initiatives. We're continuing to support a more inclusive organization in the county and in our services. The Community Equity Grant Program will continue in its third year. And we have ARPA funded dedicated for translation services to improve language access. We'll be launching assessments of our services and also more internal facing work through HR. In innovation and technology, we're continuing to support the Workday ERP system that will help integrate finance, payroll, and HR, implement the DEM system I just talked about, and social services has been implementing the CalSAW system and CalAIM for public health and behavioral wellness. And one thing we didn't put on the slide, that this is the first year in many, many years that we will have a standalone ITD department, a technology department. It's always been in general services, and as you know, this will be our first year. This budget reflects a standalone department. I'm not going to go through this whole slide, but it's to highlight that we are spending and investing in critical infrastructure. And again, you saw some of this through the capital improvement program budget that was presented. And so there is a lot that we are doing through all your departments in local funding and state funding and federal funding. And this is just to summarize that we are continuing to move forward on these important projects. So again, my budget message in April continues to be the same, that we still need to be vigilant, buckle up and be vigilant, but we also are moving forward on your board's priorities to better serve our constituents and our residents, and we continue to commit to deliver exceptional services so all in our county can enjoy a safe, healthy, and prosperous life. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our Budget Director, Paul Clementi.
Thank you, Mona. Good morning, Chair Williams, members of the board. Quick update just before I get started that there were 2 board inquiry forms distributed with the hearing materials. One was an update on a question related to arts funding that was asked at workshops, and the other was a response to a question about how many funded vacancies older than January 1st, 2022 exist in the county right now. Those have been distributed with your materials and are also posted online with the other hearing materials.
Mr. Chair, since I had one of those.
Sure.
Yeah.
Mr. Lavanino was the questioner of that BIF, so.
Yeah, and the question was just how many vacant funded positions did we have that are out in the county since before 2022? They're still vacant. And I probably didn't understand the scope of the work that you were going to be required to do, because I guess that's why we're going to move to a standalone IT department, because I guess this created a little bit of a firestorm. So I do want to say, I think this is something we should either have a agenda item about in the future before we get to the next budget, so that we can talk about what this really means. Because looking through it, it's, you know, I know there's a story behind each and every one of these positions, but I also think that this is something we need to talk about. So I don't want to hold up this year's budget, but I think between now and next year that this is something we have to discuss.
Okay, thank you. Over the following presentation, we'll discuss the context within which we developed the recommended budget. I'll go over some of the overall budget numbers and discuss additions that were made after workshops. Then we'll discuss the CEO recommended expansions and final budget adjustments before moving on to brief functional group overviews, providing updates since workshops, and departments are here to answer any questions from your board. And finally, we'll wrap up with board deliberations and recommended actions. So we kicked off this budget process in December with our development report and 5-year forecast. We worked with departments to develop preliminary budgets that were presented at the April workshops. We finalized and released the recommended budget on May 30th and are presenting that to your board today, along with recommended expansions and final budget adjustments for adoption. Many considerations go into developing the recommended budget. A close look at resources, anticipated expenses, prior commitments, and critical unmet needs are required. For fiscal year 23-24, we are projecting stable growth in both major discretionary revenue and state funding sources for ongoing services, particularly in health and human service areas. Budgeted cannabis tax revenue continues to decline, and we've swapped some funding to other general fund sources and are recommending a further swap to alleviate some of those pressures while the market stabilizes. As in past years, labor and liability costs continue to escalate and needed to be addressed in department budgets. Commitments to investments in deferred maintenance, capital projects, and information technology infrastructure have been incorporated, as well as addressing key priorities that Mona just mentioned, such as supporting vulnerable and disadvantaged populations, climate change adaptation, homelessness and housing, and more. Each year, we also look to minimize service level reductions, and departments identify needs in order to mitigate high liability risks, meet mandates, and address critical organizational needs. At budget workshops in April, we listened to feedback from your board and factored your priorities into the final recommended budget and CEO recommended expansions. And finally, as we develop the budget, we have to consider emerging issues that will create demands on resources and how we will deal with those issues to ensure continued fiscal stability. Our office has emphasized a 5-year forecast process and recommended set-asides to prepare for issues that we see on the horizon. The total operating budget for the County of Santa Barbara for fiscal year 23-24 is $1.48 billion and supports a workforce of just over 4,600 FTE. This is an increase of $90 million and 170 FTE from last fiscal year, with much of that growth in social services, behavioral wellness, and the fire department. The charts on the next few slides are similar to those that we discussed at April workshops. There hasn't been a lot of change to the overall numbers since that presentation. This is the total operating revenues by category, totaling $1.52 billion, with the vast majority, 92%, coming from 3 categories: state and federal revenue, tax receipts, and charges for services. This chart shows the same operating revenues, but categorized by the funds that receive them. The county general fund receives or collects about $558 million, or 37% of total operating revenues. Of that $558 million, about $372 million is discretionary general revenue that the Board of Supervisors has more discretion on uses of than other sources. Discretionary revenues of $372 million is an increase of 9.3% from last fiscal year, which we've discussed previously is due in part to substantial growth in the current year over what was assumed in the budget. While growth in property taxes, sales taxes, and TOT remain strong, they are partially offset by a reduction in cannabis tax revenue. This is just a further breakdown of discretionary general revenues, showing that almost 80% is from property taxes. We see cannabis dropping from almost 5% of the whole to about 2% in 23-24, with sales and TOT taxes hovering between 4 and 5% of the total. Other discretionary revenues make up the remaining 10% and include franchise fees, interest income, state and federal payments, and the county's cost allocation plan revenue that's received from the special revenue funds. This is just a different visualization of the same breakdown, showing on the left side the different sources that make up the full $372 million in discretionary general fund revenue. And we can see property taxes making up the largest bulk, 79% of that. And then the different functional groups that receive revenue as ongoing general fund contribution. This chart shows the operating expenditures by category. Salary and benefits continue to be the largest expense for the county at 53% of the budget. Recommended salary and benefit costs of $782.5 million in 23-24 is an increase of $50.1 million, or about 6.8% on the prior year. Representing the combined impact of the addition of the 170 FTE, as well as projected increases in labor costs, primarily salaries, pensions, and health insurance. This chart shows where those different object-level expenditures are being experienced. We see most salaries and benefits being expended in public safety and health and human services, where over 75% of the county's total FTE are located. Services and supplies we see mostly in health and human services, much of that being CBO contracts and behavioral wellness and IHSS provider payments and social services, as well as community resources and public facilities, with much of those expenditures being contract and professional work done out of the Public Works Department and their various operations. Each year, the Retirement Board sets employer contribution rates based on an actuarial valuation. The county's net retirement contribution increases by $11 million, or 6.7% from the 22-23 adopted budget, due to investment returns in the pension fund of about negative 1.8% on assumed returns of 7% in the 21-22 fiscal year, as well as increases in salaries and the addition of new FTE driving that number up. Of note, the almost flat increases we see in 22-23 over 21-22 were due to investment returns that year of over 25% on an assumption of 7%. This chart shows the staffing levels over 5 years by functional area. As I mentioned on a previous slide, over 75% of FTE are in health and human services and public safety. That's also where we're seeing most of the FTE increases over last year, with behavioral wellness and DSS utilizing growth in state funding to add new positions that improve their operations and service delivery, as well as fire adding positions both to staff up their new dispatch center, as well as enhance services in state responsibility areas funded by state revenue. So here I wanted to touch on what got added into the budget after receiving feedback at the workshops. We received direction on which capital projects to allocate $11.9 million to. I'll briefly touch on these on the next slide. We also heard from Public Works that they would be able to fully fund additional lighting in Isla Vista out of their CSA 31 fund balance. And we swapped $1.2 million in cannabis funding with GFC for planners and libraries, and earmarked $5 million in our emerging issues fund balance for parks, trails, and open space and other recreational opportunities that had previously been a planned use of cannabis fund balance. These changes are already incorporated into the recommended budget before you today. This is just a reminder of those projects funded with the $11.9 million. Projects include the next phase in the courthouse roof replacement, funding for energy efficiency HVAC projects, holds for grant matches on projects like Orcutt Library and solar array at Kachuma, and many more. Next, I'll discuss the CEO recommended expansions included as attachment A1 in the hearing materials. The available revenues utilized in the recommended expansions are as follows. Continuing to work with the Assessor's Office and the Auditor Controller, we received a revised estimate on property tax growth after workshops that increased ongoing discretionary revenue projections by $4.7 million. We also had discussed at workshops that there was about $800,000 of projected ongoing Proposition 172 dollars unallocated. We also went back and looked at budgeted ARPA expenditures in the current year versus estimated actual expenditures and determined there would be at least $800,000 unspent this year that could be reallocated towards other eligible one-time uses. There was also an expansion request, the Sheriff's Rapid DNA instrument, that meets eligible use requirements of the Prop 69 DNA fund that we're recommending pulling $80,200 from for one more year. Finally, as discussed at workshops, there was $2.1 million one-time general fund and $1.5 million one-time Prop 172 balance remaining unallocated. The recommended expansions on the following slides allocate the remaining revenues, with the exception of $425,000 in one-time general fund dollars that the board could direct us to allocate during deliberations or leave in fund balance. We divided our recommended expansions into the categories seen on the next two slides. The first of those that constitute unavoidable operational costs or risk exposure and include the CSD requests to fund Orcutt Branch Library rent increases and increased costs of the Black Gold system, as well as costs to maintain current level of service at emergency shelters and warming centers. There's also a general services cost of $228,000 for 24/7 security at the county's Betaravia Center that we were made aware of subsequent to workshops deriving from a report and recommendation from our physical security specialist. Finally, there's a recommendation to set aside $1.2 million ongoing and $980,000 one-time for potential costs related to ongoing litigation, settlement compliance, and other contractual obligations. In the board policy and commitments category, we are increasing the deferred maintenance amount by an additional $846,000 based on calculating 18% of the $4.7 million growth in discretionary revenues. We also recommend an additional cannabis swap of about $1.75 million, which will move other ongoing costs unrelated to the cannabis program into GFC. This includes an AOP in the elections division, a capital projects manager and general services, translation services, ongoing equity funding, and some deferred maintenance funding. Cannabis revenue continues to fund all enforcement and program administration costs, as well as over $1.5 million in ongoing deferred maintenance funding, and a wide variety of one-time funded projects, including a utility-grade solar ordinance, an employee housing study, a transportation electrification specialist in CSD, mobility projects, and more. Third category on this slide are those expansions that make use of restricted funding sources. We're recommending $500,000 of ARPA to provide one-time move-in costs such as security deposits and first month's rent under certain criteria for unincorporated areas of the county. We also have $300,000 of ARPA going towards studies at Laguna County Sanitation District to identify potential groundwater recharge sites. We have about $350,000 of one-time Prop 172 funding the sheriff's request for furniture and hardware replacement at the dispatch center, and recommending the remaining ongoing Prop 172 and $165,000 of the one-time 172 be put into a criminal justice set-aside until criminal justice needs are further clarified in the coming months. High priority needs could include those related to compliance with the Disability Rights California Structured Settlement, jail population reduction strategies, diversion programs, and more. There were some district attorney and public defender expansion requests that were contemplated as part of this set-aside that have since received alternative funding that I'll discuss more in the functional group summaries. And there are others that may still be part of the recommended release of this set-aside. Finally, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we're recommending one-time use of the DNA identification fund for the sheriff's request on the rapid DNA instrument while we continue to seek ongoing funding solutions. For the priorities we heard from the board at workshops, we're recommending funding the Deputy County Counsel to add a second personnel attorney, the one-time sustainability grant writing support requested by CSD, the one-time administrative office professional in HR to support executive and management recruitments this year, $303,000 one-time to Public Works, which, when coupled with the additional 18% revenue they'll be receiving, will total the $726,000 they requested to meet their funding needs to maintain current PCI in 23-24. We're also funding the Veteran Services Supervisor requested by the Treasurer Tax Collector, $75,000 a year for 5 years of one-time funding that we heard board support on at workshops to enhance service in the portable restrooms in Los Olivos, and $80,000 for polling work on potential tax measures. Finally, the CEO is making additional recommendations, including funding the ongoing request for HR's inclusion strategist. The CEO's recommendation here is to use $225,000 of the available $500,000 ongoing equity funding towards this position, and then adding the $40,700 we see here to match the total requested for the position, $265,700. We're also recommending $56,100 in one-time funding per board district that can be expended on programs, projects, or other infrastructure priorities in their respective districts. When particular initiatives are identified, a district office would bring an item to the board with a scope of work and costs, same as has been done in the current year. The CEO is also recommending establishment of a Sustainability Initiatives Fund in general county programs at $500,000 one time to be used towards projects or pilot programs that arise out of the Climate Action Plan, or to extend time for the Transportation Electrification Specialist in CSD that currently has one-time cannabis funding that covers about 70% of a full-time position in 23-24. The recommended expansions above allocate the remaining available funds, with the exception of $425,000 that will remain in Emerging Issues Fund balance, unless your board takes action during deliberations today to allocate that. Also part of your adoption materials today is attachment A2, the list of what we call final budget adjustments. These are adjustments that departments bring to us after we have finalized the recommended budget, and so are shown in a separate attachment that we ask your board to adopt along with the recommended budget. Many of these adjustments are carry forward activity from prior year, such as capital projects or purchases that were anticipated in the current year, but for whatever reason got delayed and the funding just needs to be shifted over into the next year, or a new grant or other funding that was awarded and the department needs to get it into the adopted budget, as well as other minor corrections or changes to the recommended budget. We've highlighted 2 of note on this slide simply because they involve increasing FTE. There's adjustment to DA, which is receiving grant funding to add a victim witness supervisor, and an adjustment from probation, which reallocates CCP funding from contractual services into salaries and benefits to add 2 FTE supporting the Familiar Faces program. That concludes my broad overview of the recommended budget and the expansions and adjustments. I can move into short updates on each of the functional groups, and departments are here to answer any questions you may have for them.
Questions on the overview from the board? And we're going to go to our first functional group, which is Health and Human Services.
Okay, so Health and Human Services made up of behavioral wellness, child support services, First 5, public health, and social services. This group receives a small portion of overall GFC, being mostly state and federal funded. It has $500 million in operating expenditures, $516 million, and makes up close to half of the county's total FTE at over 1,900. Significant updates since workshops include public health continuing to work closely with County Fire and the CEO's office on changes to EMS and transition of the unit to fire. And budgetary changes will be brought back once those details are worked out. Social services provide an update on the Farm Worker Resource Center that they have hired staff and are on track with implementation. That essentially concludes the Health and Human Services Functional Group overview.
Do we have public comment on Health and Human Services?
Chair Williams and members of the board, we do have 4 requests to speak on this functional group. And we are going to remain in Santa Barbara and begin with Nancy McCready, to be followed by Susan Horn. Nancy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Nancy McCready, and I'm going to represent the Committee for Social Justice today. I was hoping and wondering if we could possibly think about raising the temperature for the warming centers. 35 degrees is way too cold. In 1999, when the warming centers were advocated from us to open, Freedom, who caused this advocacy, died at the temperature of 38 degrees. And the reason why was because he was kind enough to lend his coat to another fellow homeless person. And I just can't understand how people can think that 35 degrees is warm enough before you open the doors. I think we should try and at least move it up to 40 degrees. Another idea that I want to run by you is that I understand that you guys are going to work on some more mental health beds, but wouldn't it be neater if we could build apartments over there by the county hospital and put them in an apartments rather than just beds, and use the crisis beds for stabilization if the need be, and not to throw the people who go off back out onto the streets, but give them a chance to stabilize out and put them back into their apartment. Because we don't want to perpetuate homelessness, we want to solve it. And we understand that some people have been thrown back out on the streets for being not behaving the way we think they should behave. And believe me, mental illness runs rampant on the streets, whether it be from depression all the way up to schizophrenia. And we need to take a look at all that. And a number of people have come up to me and asked me what I thought about this idea, and I think it's wonderful. And I think we should at least take a look at it and see if we can put some money towards it. Thank you.
We will now go to Susan Horn, to be followed by Mary Ellen Reese. Susan?
Hello. My comments are on the fentanyl opioid crisis. My name is Susan Horn. I've been a health educator for public health for 30 years. Half of that time was with the public health department in Santa Barbara County. I wanted to share my perspective. I was thrilled to hear talk of the public health director, Hamamang, assembling a potential coalition to strategize and collaborate on prevention of drug abuse. I recently spoke to Marge Gordon about her decades of work in the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Department at Santa Barbara County Public Health Department. That was prior to the initiation of behavioral wellness when the name changed. Marge Gordon was the director of the whole prevention section of the Alcohol, Drug, and Mental Health Department. There was a terrible drug crisis then, too, with the national war on drugs, especially heroin and cocaine. I have more to say, but no time. All through this time, the prevention side was receiving a lot of funding through grants, including federal funding. A drug use survey was developed and given to high school students every year, and it still is an annual survey in the Santa Barbara Union School District. The results then were alarming, as there was no effective drop in drug use, in spite of all these grant fundings. The research does not really say why, but Marge surmises that it was mostly because the prevention efforts were not reaching the kids who needed it the most. I have more to say, but no time. The good news is that there was one program that worked. These evaluations were done by researchers at UCSB on all those programs. Anyway, this one program that worked was one initiated through the schools. The schools invited the mostly Hispanic parents and families to the school for a meal and meetings, and that was what worked. I'd like to say more about why, but no time. So I also talked to the county school superintendent, Susan Salcido, on Thursday, and she confirms that she supports a focus on prevention and intervention, meeting the individual and specific needs of each child. The bottom line for Marge Gordon, long retired after decades in the trenches of drug prevention, is that we need to strengthen the institutions. This means primarily, all the institutions, but this primarily means schools and public health. I look forward to real comprehensive efforts addressing the root causes of drug abuse.
Thank you, Susan. That is your time.
Thank you.
We will now go to Mary Ellen Reese, to be followed by Trail Eastland. Mary Ellen?
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Reese. I am a homeowner in Solvang. And I'm also Executive Director of Children and Family Resource Services, a nonprofit organization operating in partnership with the Santa Barbara County Education Office. I know many of you here, and it's always good to see you. After the isolation we went through during the pandemic, I don't take these moments in person for granted anymore, and I much prefer them to ones on a screen. I was just here not too long ago with one of my staff who was honored for her work with promotoras, community health workers. We were wearing masks then. I've been here many times also to talk about our oral health needs of children in our preschools and elementary schools, and the effective and important dental prevention work we are doing together. I want to thank the county for all the support they continue to give us in those areas. Today I'm here to highlight another important need in our community and how we've worked together for many years to successfully meet that need through the Welcome Every Baby program we call WEB for short. WEB started 22 years ago and has provided nurse home visits for more than 18,000 families. It has been a pleasure for our organization to provide the WEB program for the last 15 years, when First Five brought this important healthcare service under our direction. This beloved community program produces evidence-based positive results for postpartum mothers and newborns. Our outcomes align with the same priorities you have, and funding by both public and private sources have supported it over the years. Between WEB, Public Health, and Marion, all families in our county have the opportunity for a nurse home visit, ensuring the physical and mental health of the new mother and baby during a critical and risky time for them. That comprehensive coverage ends today. Today, we will stop taking new referrals so we can complete home visits with the families by the end of our fiscal year, June 30th, when all funding is completely exhausted. Long-term funding was close to being realized, but for a number of reasons, those solutions could not come in time to keep the program open. I hope that our healthcare community recognizes how important this service has been and that a healthcare provider will step forward to meet this need. This is going to leave a huge gap in services for many vulnerable newborns and their families. Our public health department is doing amazing work in this area with their own patients. The public health patients are well taken care of. Marion will look out for those delivered at their hospital. But I ask you to think about how to support reinstating this service so that we have a comprehensive network of care that leaves no one alone once they leave the hospital with their first baby. I know you have many priorities to juggle, and public dollars cannot solve every problem. Our healthcare system needs to step up and do their part. It's often difficult to put prevention first when you have a crisis standing at the door. I ask you to take an active role in helping facilitate the Return to the Web program. Keep those positive outcomes for infant and maternal health in place for all who need it, because all do need it. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Trally Eastland, to be followed by E-Planet Thunderstriker, who is our final speaker. Trally?
Hi. While I've been called Trally, Tralee, all kinds of things, my name is Trail Eastland. I've been the nurse manager for Welcome Every Baby for 22 years. Today is going to be my last day to go into the hospital and talk to families. So if I start crying, you'll just have to excuse that. My nursing staff wanted to be here today, and I asked that it would be just too many people, too many nurses, and families wanted to come as well. But instead I asked to get a few stories from the nurses about what they've seen over the years. So I'm just going to read some, and I've changed it some to protect the confidentiality of the families. On exam, this newborn was jaundice, had 12% weight loss, and dark urine. I sent the baby to the pediatrician and labs were drawn. The bilirubin was over 24. The baby was rushed to the hospital and spent several days in the NICU. His pediatric appointment wasn't for another week after the nurse's visit, so that would have been missed. On the exam, the newborn had elevated respiration, intercostal retraction, circumoral cyanosis. The infant was on oxygen via nasal cannula. However, the unit wasn't working properly. I assisted the family in using the unit properly, and the baby showed a rapid improvement. On exam, this 5-day-old newborn was sleepy and had low temperature of 96. The baby was taken to the ER and admitted to the hospital and put on antibiotics. This 3-day-old newborn had very low diaper count, increased heart rate, and dry mucous membranes. He was readmitted to the hospital for dehydration. Those go on, some on the mom, being mindful of the time. On exam, this mother's vital signs were abnormal. The incision showed redness and swelling at her C-section. She was referred to the OB, who opened and drained the incision site, and the mother was put on antibiotics. On exam, this mom's breasts were hot, red, swollen, and she had mastitis that was discovered during this visit. On this visit, the mom complained of intense headaches. She was referred to the OB and received a spinal patch, and the headaches resolved. On this visit, the mom talked about during her pregnancy, she had some mental health concerns and suicidal ideations, but she wasn't able to get the proper support because she was pregnant. They didn't know what to do with this mom. It was from our visit that she was able to get a caseworker and the proper support and medication. Anyway, the list goes on of the things that we've seen. We are nurses and international board certified lactation consultants. There's been discussions about trying to provide another type of home visitation program for newborns with health advocates or non-nursing staff. So I ask that you revisit all of this and really consider helping all the families in our community, not just the public health families and not just the families that deliver at Santa Maria Marian Health Dignity. Thanks.
We will now go to E-Planet Thunderstriker, who is our final speaker on this functional group. E-Planet?
Oh, I'm sure you're happy to see me, all of you. I wasn't even really going to make comments today. I had papers that I had to drop off that I gave to the clerk that were supposed to be part of my claim. And coincidentally, for some reason, those papers didn't make it from the clerk's office to the risk management investigator. One of the issues in that was directly related to risk management, part of the complaint. I was talking with the behavioral wellness people outside a week or two after I was in the county admin building. Receptionist was hiding behind the door, minute by minute notes, and so I had to try to resolve that. And so I talked with them, and then a few days later, I'm talking with Greg, the supervisor of risk management. He presents the card that was there that day, where they were making handwritten notes. And he also gave me the option that maybe he could get me an appointment with Mrs. Hartman. And that card that he got, it didn't have the papers that I submitted to the other employee about what had happened that day and other certain things. So there was certainly some issue there. And with the papers I submitted, maybe it'll be questionable as to why he's saying that I could be getting an appointment with Ms. Hartman when supposedly I'm running around the admin as an irrational person doing things I shouldn't be doing. And now I'm again banned from being here unless I'm at public comments without an appointment. And this just happened like last week. So November to January, I'm banned, and then I start making public comments, and it's okay until my claim gets denied with, things I just told you. So based on what the community might be interested in, all those people that were here about we need more beds, not jails, I'm going to be talking today about a variety of things related to my problems in the music industry, why I can't produce music, because America is now governed by corruption. It's not a global economy, but it is international agendas and influences are determining what's going on in America, why I'm dealing with so much corruption here, constantly under the nose of people watching. A lot of people have been involved for the last few years. I'm definitely the black sheep of Santa Barbara legend. And it's just a lot of these people, they know what's going on. But that whole beds thing and these people that don't have a rational understanding of court proceedings these days, it's okay, well, maybe Americans are getting stupider. I mean, because you look at the media and that's what it seems that otherwise maybe it's corruption. I mean, how is it that we have newer psychology, newer medicine, but people coincidentally don't understand what's going on in the courtroom? No, it's just corruption, and it's the kind of thing that other countries appreciate, that we don't resolve that problem, and we further decay our culture, our government. So just good luck.
And that concludes public comment on this functional group.
Proceed to our functional group with community resource and public facilities.
Supervisor Williams, the board will discuss at the end, at what point will the board come in?
We'll go, you can ask questions at the end of each functional group, but we would deliberate at the end of all the functional groups.
So if I may?
Absolutely.
I would just like to make a comment about Welcome Every Baby. I know that a variety of entities are trying to figure that out. I would like the county to be an active partner in that discussion. It is, in my view, a critical program. I think all of us who've had children, when that new baby comes home and you've never really had a child, you really need all the advice you can get. And it's one thing to go to doctor's appointments. It's something else entirely to have someone come in your home and see your setup and be there. The Welcome Every Baby program has 1 to 3 visits for new parents, and I think getting them off to a good start is really critical. So again, I know there are ongoing discussions, but somewhere in the county, if not the education department, then public health or someplace, social services, we should help to be an active player in this, how it unfolds.
I think it's an excellent exhibit of why it's good to have some resources squirreled away for emerging issues, because we don't know what mix will be needed to make a reboot of the program happen. I can tell you from personal experience, it's an enormously valuable program. It's kind of weird in our society how little we talk about the kind of the nitty gritty about having a newborn. We talk about the awesome parts, but we don't always talk about the is this normal, or how to do this, how to do that. And I can tell you it's an enormously valuable program.
Chair Williams, I'm looking at Director Hamami, and I think public health can be our lead and be active in this engagement, in this discussion. So rest assured that he will be, and he's nodding his head yes. So, sure.
Good morning. I wanted to add that, yes, absolutely, this is I had the chance to look at the web program. But we do have at Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health, we do have a similar program that offers similar support and even beyond, which is our Healthy Families America and our visiting nurses. However, that applies to a certain vulnerable population, and these are the at a certain economic class. So there are also visiting nurses with our First Five program as well, and I think there is a potential to collaborate and expand that program. So there are other programs that are functioning. It is sad to see that that goes because of the comprehensive population that it serves, but we do have some programs that are functioning as well.
Supervisor Nelson?
I think Supervisor Hartman wanted to follow up on that.
So just to be clear, so I understand, public health and you will play a role in knitting together, weaving together a comprehensive system, working with partners to make sure that every baby is welcomed.
As much as we can, yes.
Thank you. And bring it back to the board so we know what happened.
I would appreciate that whatever is the plan comes back to the board for at least a receive and file.
Absolutely.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Williams. My wife and I are proud graduates of the Marion program 20 years ago this summer, so we know it well and what a big difference it made for our family. I would like to, in part of that, understand what the differences are north and south there, that the program is available for Santa Maria Valley families, but somehow it's not available in Santa Barbara, how Cottage interacts there or invests in that.
So we'll be very happy to do a presentation on our Healthy Family America program. I think it will give you some information on the services that we provide and who qualifies for that. I know initially when I heard about the stop of the web program that we estimate there is a portion of those that are benefiting from it that are Medi-Cal population that we can serve through our program. However, anybody that is in different categories probably will not be qualified for that.
Thank you.
We'll come back to the board after Director Hamami has had time to work with First Five and come back with some ideas for you. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you.
And thank you to the public speakers for highlighting the issue. Let's go to Community Resource and Public Facilities.
Chair Williams, I believe we're at General Government and Support Services. Oh, okay, sorry, my slides have General Government and Support Services next. I can either skip down or follow the agenda. I'll move forward on these. We have Auditor, Controller, Clerk, Recorder, Assessor, General Services, Human Resources, Treasurer, Tax Collector, Public Administrator, which also manages debt services, and Information Technology. This group hovers around the 10% mark in all categories, with $46 million in GFC, $131 million in operating expenditures, and 400 FTE. Updates since workshops include the transfer of an ERP support position from the Auditor's Office to the IT department, as well as the addition of a data architect in IT, which is a position transferred from the CEO department. These changes have all been incorporated in the recommended budget. This functional group received 4 expansion requests, which I discussed earlier in the presentation. And that concludes the summary of the General Government and Support Services group.
Any questions on this item? Make sure, Mr. Clementi, just so that you know, because I still have community resource and public facilities up. So let's make sure we do that before public safety.
Sure, we can skip over to those for sure.
Questions on this functional group? Request to speak.
Chair Williams and members of the board, we have one request to speak on the General Government and Support Services Functional Group, and we are going to ePlanet Thunderstriker. ePlanet, is he still here? It appears he has left the room, so that concludes public comment on that functional group.
Any questions or comment on this functional group? Then we will go back to community resource and public facilities.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Sorry for the confusion. This functional group is made up of the Ag Commissioner, Weights and Measures Department, Community Services, Planning and Development, and Public Works. This group receives $25 million in GFC, comprises about 20% of the total operating expenditures, and has 550 FTE. As I mentioned earlier, since workshops, $250,000 was built into the recommended budget using fund balance and CSA 31 in Public Works to provide additional lighting in Isla Vista. These are the 7 expansions that the group is receiving as a whole, previously discussed. It includes 4 for CSD, 2 for Public Works, and the Sustainability Fund in General County programs. These are the remaining expansion requests that did not receive funding from the departments in this functional group. All are in CSD. I do want to note one typo on this slide. The arts request does not have FTE associated with it. There's no 5 FTE request as part of the arts request here. The total FTE requested by the department is 3, with a total ongoing ask about $850,000. The requests include ongoing funding for a transportation electrification specialist, ongoing funding for a land stewardship and carbon farming specialist, a climate adaptation and resiliency specialist, funding for a climate fellow, and funding to reduce arts' reliance on fund balance for ongoing operations. That concludes the Community Resources and Public Facilities functional group.
Supervisor Capps.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank my colleagues for the support of funding for Isla Vista lighting, just to make sure that students are safe walking to and from libraries late at night when that's all they're doing, right? Studying. But thank you. I just wanted to appreciate the emphasis on safety, especially in Isla Vista. Thank you.
Supervisor Hart.
Well, I know that we've got an upcoming board item on arts funding, but I'd like to just put out that I think one way to enhance the funding and would like it considered is raising the fee at the bowl. I think it's currently 50 cents. If that could be expanded or increased perhaps to $1. So I would like that to be in the mix of things that come back to the board when we discuss art funding. And then I also had a question. We put aside some money for ECAP and other sustainability initiatives, but I'm the Sustainability Transportation Electrification Specialist. That could be funded out of that, or that could be funded for 1 year out of our existing 425. Is that correct?
Supervisor Hartman, through the chair, that's correct.
Okay.
We need to receive direction
Right.
at deliberations on that. There is, Mona's reminding me, there is $115,000 of one-time funding already associated with that position in 23-24. If I can take a step back, 22-23 budget, the department requested a similar position and received $160,000 one time for that position in 22-23. During the year, they had another position that lost some funding, and they decided to combine the duties of the ZEV specialist with this other and kind of mix the funding and stretch it for 2 years. So they didn't expend, they expended about $50,000 of that 160 in the current year. That carries over into next year to fund that position. So their total ask of 160, they would need about 50,000 more in 23-24 to make that a full-time position for the year, but there is no other funding associated with that at this time if that was wanted to extend it longer or make it ongoing.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think what we'll see on the 27th is the difficulty at reaching our carbon reduction goals. It's pretty hard to envision doing it without a massive increase in electrification, and sometimes Santa Barbans just assume that we're like really cool on the environment without checking the numbers, and it actually, our electric vehicle ownership as of 2022 was lower than the state average, and so maybe that's a reality check, but also room for improvement. The first quarter of this year was almost 19% of new sales, so that's a good turnaround and a reason to have hope. But I do think that us making this a full-time position, even if we just allocate 50,000 as opposed to 160, would be really important to do. I remember, because we did a summary, there was at least 3 of us that were in support of that in the last budget hearing. But I just think that this one's a one to highlight, and if they have one, if they have most of the amount there, it may be able to be accomplished for less.
So, Chair Williams, thank you. Just to reiterate what Paul said before, if you would like to, in your deliberations, the department only needs $50,000 because they have other one-time, if you would like to have it one-time for next year. Correct, Paul? So that's just to be clear, there's no ongoing funding that we have available to allocate, but of the $500,000 fund, you could say, hey, Mona, we want all that towards this position over how many years it could carry. So just FYI, it is $50,000 they would need for next fiscal year to have one person continue this work for next year.
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Williams. While we're on that item, so I guess the question for the CEO or the budget director would be, would you then recommend that we potentially brought the Sustainability Initiatives Fund down to 450 as an allocation and then take the 50 from there? Is that how you're envisioning that?
It's at your board's discretion. We weren't sure where your board wanted to go, and so in deliberations, you could ask us to do that.
But so my understanding, though, that as part of your recommended budget was that $500,000 to help potentially fill some of these spots as it started to tie in a little bit more with our climate action plan. It was kind of a little premature to know exactly which ones are going to fit or if it needed somewhere else.
Supervisor Nelson, through the chair, yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understood that. Getting back to the other budget expansions that the CEO recommended, number 15, the Public Works Deferred Maintenance item. I just wanted to confirm that that is an amount that will get us to at least maintaining our PCI throughout the county.
Supervisor Nelson, through the chair, that's correct. The total ask was $726,000. At that time, we had already allocated out the 18%, but now we have grown the 18% a little more. They're receiving half of that $846,000 growth in the CEO recommended expansions, as well as this 303 that gets them to the 726.
That's great. Thank you, Paul. I think it's a really important thing to highlight here is that we are going to make sure that our deferred maintenance does not get worse. I often have criticized this board for essentially debt financing some of our budgets by not at least maintaining a level of PCI. So I think that's something to acknowledge and to celebrate. And I just wanted to make sure that I understood that correctly. Thank you.
Supervisor Capps.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out on the screen there, the sustainability grant writing support. It seems kind of bureaucratic, but just wanted to point out that there's never been so much funds, state and federally. So this one position can access literally millions upon millions, tens of millions of dollars of state and federal funds that exist. So I'm glad that this is part of the expansion report, and just know that it will help us reach our climate goals. So it's a good bang for the buck. That's $75,000. Thanks.
Supervisor Hart.
Thank you. I just think this is one to put on the table right now. I think all the supervisors have heard from people on private property with streams and creeks running through their land that they're very concerned, given the experience of the last winter storms and what's in store for us now with the El Nino predicted. So one idea that I have is that, and consulting with our CEO, what might we be able to do? Put aside, say, $50,000 for an ombudsman. This person might do two things. One, be available to consult with private landowners about what they can and can't do, but even more importantly, help to navigate possibly with the programmatic EIR, the overall system, because it's really intimidating for a government agency, much less a private individual, dealing with the Army Corps of Engineers, Cal Fish and Game, US EPA, US Fish and Wildlife. I mean, all of those come around creeks, and it's really daunting. And we have to figure out how to deal with that in a better way. So at least to put a little money aside to, I've entitled it Cutting Green Tape, but so that would be an initiative that we could start. It also, there are many landowners, particularly agricultural large landowners, who have would like to engage in more restoration of creeks, and so this again deals with the permitting, how to go about that. So it's just a toe in the water, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Mr. Lavanino.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first off, I want to, I don't know what it is, patent it or whatever they do with cutting green tape.
Yeah.
That is such a
I wrote down copyright.
Yeah,
Let's
copyright,
get
yeah. I already beat you to it. I'm all right.
I think it's a state program
Okay.
that we're borrowing
Bummer.
from.
Figures. Every good idea has been taken. Well, and I totally support that. If I thought more money would get us there faster, and maybe it will, but I'm good with setting aside some money, and I don't know if you're talking about out of our $425,000 one time.
Yeah, that 50,000. Yeah, one
okay.
time.
So yeah, I mean I'm good with that, and if it needs to be more, I would support that too, because for me that's the most critical issue right now in the 5th District is trying to figure out how to navigate that. But I'm not sure it's money, and I'd like to hear from. Money won't hurt. I know that much too. That it'll help, but I know we're also waiting for Public Works, Flood Control to come back and give us an update on, where we are, where we're going. We need OEM as part of that too. So.
And if I may, Chair Williams, I just wanted to add, this may be a collaboration between Public Works and Sustainability, but if we have a budget item set aside, then it gives us some accountability. Where are we going with it? Report back. How's it being spent?
Supervisor Nelson.
Yeah, I wanted to lend my support to the concept as a whole. I know right now our staff is diligently working hard. Walter Rubicava, Kelly Hubbard, Andrew Neff, really putting a lot of time and effort into that, and really advocating for us at the state and federal level. And so we've got some real heroes out there. This is a big deal throughout the county, and something needs to be funded, whether that comes from general fund set-asides, water agency dollars, even if it ultimately have to dip into strategic reserve in 23-24 to address this. This is an emergency still. The emergency from the January storms are not over. They're ongoing, and it's something that I think it's a high priority for all of us, and I'm willing to support anything that the CEO or Public Works or Community Services want to do to address this issue.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Chair Williams and members of the board, yes, we have 2 requests to speak on this item. Our first was ePlanet Thunderstrucker, and then we will go to Zoom with Jenna Norton. ePlanet.
You guys need to get in a good mood for this one, because this is the only one I don't have a big complaint about. So a leadership and decision-making Parks and Rec program after school. It should be started as a summer camp right now. I made some notes to the Commission for Women, and this is more of what these people can completely understand, where I'm like this talking with you guys after I'm here on maybe like the 7th of February saying I have some notes for the Commission for Women. I'm going to give them in a few days. I give them those notes in a few days, and the next week the governor of South Carolina announces her candidacy for presidency. Well, these notes were a strategy for getting a female president out there. But I was treated really not well at the Commission for Women meeting, and they ignored one of my public comments, and then the last I had like 2 minutes, and it's like, wait a minute, I influenced this huge political leader in America that everybody else knows her name. She's like an ambassador or something, and I get like 2 minutes. And they were in Solvang. Those pages that I gave you that you didn't get, or that the risk management didn't get from the clerk, were originally submitted, most of them, a lot of them, to the somebody in Solvang. And Solvang, this little tiny city. So after I speak to them, and then they're in Solvang, that raises a few red flags. But if like a bunch of older females could come together with a bunch of younger females and work on what it means to be a leader and to do the kind of decisions that they need, that would be what we would need to have a female president that's going to do something. I mean, we've had really mediocre male presidents, and I'm trying to express to everybody that our country's having a big, real problem, and I don't even really know that there's going to be in America by the time a 7th grader is old enough to be president. I mean, right? We have what's going on in the 50s, people don't lock their doors, and now what we're dealing with, and I'm here talking about it, trying to get any kind of action going on, and that's not happening. And now we do definitely have a low bar for our presidents, because clearly this person knows that if I'm alive in a few more months, that she will have known all about all of this, and she didn't try to resolve any of it, but she wants to be the president of America. So that's really it. The Commission for Women, the ladies, they need to get together. They need to start doing something now. And my suggestion is instead of my lawsuit that I could file, or my claim, which I don't even really know that I really care that much anymore, that maybe you guys say, well, what we are going to do, we're not really going to actually support him, but we can do like everybody else and just do like a summer camp for girls, and talk about it to other counties, other states, because that should be going on right now in order to save America, to deal with our crime, to deal with all these people who don't have a rational understanding of court proceedings.
We will now go to our final speaker on this functional group, and we are going to Zoom with Jenna Norton. Jenna?
Hi. I just wanted to speak on the money being allotted to Isla Vista for additional street lighting. I just wanted to thank everyone, because the issue of lack of lighting in Isla Vista is one that's been going on for years, and it's probably the most common issue I hear about from the public. So I just want to say thank you very much for hearing us out on that.
And that concludes public comment on this functional group.
So we will take a 10-minute break for our translator and then return and do the public safety functional group. We're going to reconvene. We will reconvene our functional group presentation is for public safety. Mr. Clementi.
Thank you, Chair Williams. Our next item is public safety, functional overview. The departments that make up this group are Court Special Services, District Attorney, Fire, Probation, Public Defender, and Sheriff. This group receives the most GFC at $162 million, or 43% of the county total. And they have roughly a third of both the operating expenditures at $458 million and the FTE at $1,668. A couple updates on public safety. For the SB 184 issue, which assesses a penalty on counties if they exceed a cap on individuals committed as incompetent to stand trial on felony charges, the multi-department County IST work group continues to meet and make progress, designing a plan to reduce the county's IST commitments. Also, due to continued conversations with counties around the state is considering changes to the methodology it uses to calculate the growth cap and resulting penalties. Another update comes from the DA and Public Defender. After workshops, both departments went to the CCP with funding asks for expansion requests they had presented to the board in April. The DA was successful in receiving 3 years of funding for a victim witness advocate and the 1-year funding requested for a limited term position to assist with implementation of their case management system. The Public Defender received 3 years of funding for the attorney to help with Racial Justice Act implementation. Here we see the 2 recommended expansions for the sheriff, as well as the criminal justice set-aside I discussed earlier. There is a remaining attorney requested from the district attorney for $156,600 and 2 LOP supervisors in Public Defender for $270,100 that are contemplated as potential uses for this set-aside. As our office continues to review the needs of the criminal justice system, we will come back with recommendations on releases of funding from the set-aside. The remaining expansion requests from departments in this group that did not receive funding are an investigator for the DA, and in the sheriff's office, a narcotics team, a custody bus replacement, an additional cannabis team, additional custody and patrol staffing, and a supervising accountant. These requests total 18 FTE, about $3.9 million in ongoing costs, and about $900,000 in one-time. That concludes the public safety functional group summary. I do believe the sheriff has elected to present to your board today.
I have a question. Question from Mr. Lavanio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my focus is on the DA's request for the parole hearing individual. And I understand that it's going to come back to us. Question is, and when? And because I don't want to see a lapse where we're, a 6 month or a year where we don't have somebody filling that position.
Supervisors Lavanese, through the chair, we have in our materials that we intend to come back after the first quarter of the year. So correct?
Yeah, the intention would be in the next few months. I believe ACO Heitman, she's looking at a variety of issues in the criminal justice system in the coming months and want to be sure that the funding is allocated to the areas of highest need.
Yeah, and I just want to be in agreement and also highlight the public defender also has highlighted an issue, and both I think need to be looked at more. And I think that's a placeholder, and we have 172 funds set aside for such placeholders. Sheriff Brown, my understanding is the sheriff wanted to present. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair Williams and members of the board. Today, I would like to give you a brief update on our budget expansion request, which we presented to you at the budget workshop in April. Although we are still confronted with a proliferation of illicit drugs in our county, drugs that are the primary factor in the fentanyl crisis and related overdose deaths, we do, however, have some encouraging news on this front that I wanted to share with you. Fentanyl-related overdose deaths appear to be going down year to date, from 46 at this time last year to 40 this year. That's a 13% decline. We believe that our efforts, along with those of our allied agencies in increasing public awareness and education about the dangers of fentanyl, and in facilitating the widespread distribution of Narcan, or naloxone as it's generically called, have begun to yield positive results. We hope to see this decline hold throughout the coming year, but although we're seeing progress, we still have had 40 suspected fentanyl overdose-related deaths in our county so far this year. That's 40 sons, daughters, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, friends, and other loved ones who died tragically, prematurely, and needlessly. The Sheriff's Office and our allied agency, Narcotic Investigative Resources, continue to be at their lowest level in the last 25 or more years. Our communities have a critical need for enhanced narcotic investigation and services. The more fentanyl that we can take off the streets, the more lives will be saved. We urgently need another narcotics team, but we have been told there's insufficient funding available for such an asset this year. As a result of that, I want to focus on another important expansion request that should be much more achievable. The Sheriff's Office is still dealing with an ongoing staffing deficit in both patrol and custody operations, as you are well aware, which results in high overtime use each year. While much of this overtime cost is offset by salary savings due to vacant positions, excessive overtime has a negative effect on our staff, on their ability to take time off, to achieve work-life balance, and ultimately a negative effect on their morale. As mentioned at the budget workshop, we in the Sheriff's Office again are asking you to reimagine how the county can adequately and properly staff the Sheriff's Office in its patrol and custody branches. Since the Great Recession, we have been operating at or below minimum staffing levels in both of these critically important parts of our organization. In addition to our funded vacancies, we remain down 75 general fund positions, including 50 sworn positions that have been lost since 2007. That's a daunting number. It's at the core of what drives our critical staffing problems. Year after year, we've asked for these positions to be restored, only to be told there was inadequate general fund revenue to do so. So today, I'm asking you once again what I asked you at the workshop, to consider taking a different and innovative approach and adopt an incremental process to begin replacing the number of general fund staff positions lost. Starting a process of gradually upstaffing our agency in this way would get us on a path to having an appropriate number of human resources in both patrol and jail operations, which are both crucial areas. Think about where we would be if we had been doing just that for the past 10 years. Even if it were just 2 positions a year, we'd be 20 positions closer to where we need to be today. Likewise, think of where we will be in the next 10 years if we begin such a plan this year and continue it each year. We continue to have challenges recruiting sworn custody deputies in the midst of what is a regional, statewide, and national challenge. But I'm pleased to report that we anticipate sending 8 custody deputy trainees to the Corps Academy class on June the 26th. Nevertheless, we will still have 31 custody vacant positions, and we will likely not be in a position to fill beyond those vacancies in the near future. So that's why I'm asking you today to fill the 2 requested sheriff's deputy positions, patrol positions, instead. I'm very pleased to report to you that since the budget workshop, our recruiting efforts for the position of sheriff's deputy have been quite successful. We now anticipate sending 18 deputy sheriff trainees to the next Allen Hancock College Law Enforcement Academy class, which will start the first week of July. At that point, we will have filled every one of our vacant deputy sheriff lines. That puts us in an excellent position to hire 2 additional deputy sheriff trainees to start to replace those lost in the wake of the Great Recession. The men and women of your sheriff's office do an outstanding job that makes a difference each and every day. And I understand that these are difficult requests during challenging times, but I ask you to please consider that since the Great Recession, we in the sheriff's office have only received 2 general fund deputy sheriff positions. That's just 2 in the last 15 years. Accordingly, I ask you to once again strongly consider this urgently needed budget expansion request. I thank you in advance for your consideration, and please let me or my staff know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Is there any public comment?
Chair Williams and members of the board, yes, we have 3 requests to speak on this functional group. We are going to remain here in Santa Barbara with Maureen Earls, to be followed by E-Planet Thunderstriker. Maureen?
Good morning. I'm speaking as an individual member of our CLUE Criminal Justice Work Group. I want to comment on 2 budget items that I mentioned in my letter to you this week: jail reduction and the fund for the opioid crisis. Regarding jail reduction, our whole team fully supports the board's vote for option 1 regarding jail reduction. It can safely save the county an estimated cost of over $60 million from building 2 pods to 1 pod. The public looks forward to the CEO's strategic, actionable plan, which I am confident will achieve the sustained jail reduction goal. Also, one tool recommended for jail reduction is electronic monitoring. I appreciate Chief Wazalewski's providing information to our team. It would be helpful to have an annual report with very specific data on applications, records of approvals and rejections, and any barriers. Michael Wilson recommended increasing use of this jail reduction tool, and jail reports currently do not show that happening yet. Funding public safety. The public needs to be clear regarding the county's master plan for funding the fentanyl opioid crisis. The governor gave us a model of his comprehensive master plan for funding. He states expand enforcement efforts to crack down on criminal organizations trafficking this poison to our community. Also, he adds, prioritizing harm reduction strategies to reduce overdoses and compassionately help those struggling with substance use and addiction. I support our county creating a master plan for this opioid crisis, including funding the Sheriff's Department, but also balanced with targeted funding for prevention strategies and treatment. Also, we need to know how our county's plan for the use of the portion of the state's $1 billion funding for this crisis. Thank you.
We will now go to E-Planet Thunderstriker, to be followed by Gail Osherenko. E-Planet?
Thank you. So those pages that you have, they were reviewed by a lieutenant for the Sheriff's Department. He was promoted from professional standards as a sergeant to lieutenant, where he was also doing a double duty as the chief of Sylvain. And I've been to the sheriff's headquarters, and I don't think my professional standards complaint has gone anywhere. There's a lot of officers involved, and we know that, typically there's, bad cops, doing this, that, and the other thing. And I'm saying that the reason why I'm making these allegations and those people aren't getting busted already is because I'm just dealing with so much corruption. Nobody's really doing anything, no matter what I talk here. This whole town hates me, I guess, maybe because it was as president, and I was like this liberal Democrat or something, because of my song, that had some Spanish. And the whole Mexican thing is just, I don't understand what you guys say is appropriate about what's going on with the fact that their country hasn't gotten together. I mean, they haven't asked for any UN intervention. I mean, the 10th largest pollution rate in the world, they could pay for UN to come in and fix things. I mean, if they say we treat them like dogs, they could ask us to help out too. But that's not what's going on with the high pollution rate. They have infrastructure and their peso value's gone up. So the reason we have all these fentanyl drugs is because they want, well, the people to die a little bit easier, but our kids, you know, they slow down, they're not really energetic, and they're really depressed. So that's, you know, it's just you're running around in circles for several years, ever since the commie hippies took over. I mean, you have a society that doesn't lock their doors at night, and what's going on here needs a lot more addressing than this finite little particular issue. It's like he needs to get with other law enforcement agencies, our whole government, because now the FBI is corrupt with Trump firing the FBI director after I filed a civil lawsuit related to probably the reason why he ran. And so that stuff is going to go on. I mean, it's been going on for my whole lifetime when it wasn't going on before my whole lifetime. Whatever options he has isn't going to resolve absolutely anything. Now, I like the idea of incremental policing because it's like, well, do they have an effect on crime? And that means more taxes, happier people. Well, that's a good way to start, but it's all going to be just a carrot on a stick until America makes it to where it's supposed to be in the minds of everybody else, not America.
We will now go to Gail Osherenko, who is our final speaker on this item.
Thank you. You got my name just right. Chair Williams and Commissioners, I just want to thank you on behalf of myself and the Task Force on Criminal Justice of the League of Women Voters of Santa Barbara. We've sent you lots of letters in the past and spoken with various ones of you. And we were here and watching the budget workshops. And I just want to say we really appreciate the work that the CEO's office has done to put together this budget and the recommendations today. And we feel confident that the CEO's office is going to continue to work with the public safety agencies to accomplish a path we've been started on towards not overbuilding the jails, and instead really try to serve our population in the community. So we look forward to the work that's, I think, already beginning to happen to address the needs of people with mental health and addiction problems who too often end up in our jails. And we want to strongly support the recommendation for 2 LOP supervisor positions for the public defender. It won't solve their problem entirely, but it certainly would go a long way to addressing the burden that's on the people who are doing supervision of way too many people today. So thank you for your time and all the work you're doing.
And that concludes public comment on this functional group.
Mr. Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Williams. Just a couple questions of clarification within this group. The public defender legal office professional, that's been deferred to, I just want to make sure I have that, I understand that completely.
Chair Williams, Supervisor Nelson, they're requesting 2 LOP experts, I believe what was originally requested, to provide better supervision within the office. However, we would like to take sufficient time to analyze the overall structure of the office and how the reporting is currently laid out, how it could be improved upon. We agree that the current structure is not appropriate. There are too many individuals reporting to one, but there seems to be some opportunity for improvements beyond just adding 2 additional staff. So we want to make sure that the structure is appropriately designed before we add additional ones to it. And then as mentioned earlier, we are looking at the totality of the priorities and really trying to make sure that if there's other funding opportunities that we're securing those and that we're focusing on those of the highest priority.
Okay, I just want to better understand that because it's not showing up on recommendations that have been deferred to this hearing. It's showing up still in the specific departments. And I think the asterisk there says funding for this position has been set aside in general county programs for future allocation. CO will bring the final funding allocation recommendation to the board in the coming months. So there is potentially funding available if necessary, but and if it comes in future months, that will probably need to be a 4/5 vote at that point to bring in money out of general county programs to fund that position once we've exhausted those resources.
Supervisor Nelson, through the chair, that funding is funding for that position as well as the attorney, the parole hearings attorney and DA's office are contemplated as part of the $784,000 that criminal justice set aside we're discussing, which is ongoing Prop 172 dollars. If that's what Tanya's talking about coming back with in subsequent months after looking at that, and if it's like yes, move forward, that would be the funding source we go to is coming out of that Prop 172 set aside.
Okay, so there's money in the budget to potentially move forward with that, and that would be part of the action today. But not specifically those dollars, but there is those dollars.
It would have to come back to the board during the year for a budget revision. It would be a 4/5 to, at that point, recognize that allocation in the department and add those FTE.
Okay.
Right now, it's just, it will, with these recommendations today, it would remain part of the set aside in Department 990.
Okay, good. And I just want to reassure those departments that as a 4/5 vote is necessary, that I would be one of those 4 of those 5 that would be voting for that. So I know that there might be some heartburn about whether getting that done today in a 3/5 vote versus in the future. And I just want to make sure that that's, that they can plan for support from at least myself, and I'm sure some of my other colleagues will be jumping in on that as well. The other question I have is where, we just come out of that discussion about increasing the North County Jail, the single pod versus 2 pods, and what part of our budget this year is going towards that? Is there some capital investment that we are allocating towards that process at this point? I'm trying to pull that out because I know that's part of the discussion moving forward. Are there any?
Supervisor Nelson, through the chair, on the Northern Branch Jail pods, there is some funding in the recommended expansions that would be set aside and go towards the design piece. I don't think that is going to be the full cost, but I don't think we have that number yet. But there is funding that's going to be available to start at least on the design portion of what that looks like, given your board's direction.
Okay. And the difference between whether that was going to be a single pod or 1.5 pods or 2 pods, would that be incrementally different? I know we're going to come back and have a further discussion on this as we get some more information. Could you help me out with that? I just want to, it would be my preference that we have as much flexibility and not be restrained by budget, by process and evaluating that data as it moves forward in this discussion.
Supervisor Nelson, through the chair, it's our plan to bring that item back for further discussion around the allocation for the design. And at that time, we would be able to speak to what the difference would be for design for 2 different options or 1 option.
Okay. So you wouldn't anticipate budgetary restraints being a limiting factor?
Supervisor, through the chair, no. We would ensure that the board, if you give us direction, we would make sure that the funding is available.
All right, thank you.
Supervisor Harden.
Just a couple of comments. I first wanted to commend the sheriff for Project Opioid. I certainly have learned a lot that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else about what this crisis has. I really would like to see the other cities step up on a task force. They've done that with dispatch, and I think that would incline me to be much more eager to step up too. So just want to put that out there. Very excited about law enforcement recruits. It's a noble profession, and we've heard in retirements how satisfying that profession is. It's really powerful testimony to what kind of a career. My number one concern is the custody deputy crisis, and I know we've all had letters and understand what the impact is on our custody deputies and their families. So I just wanted to ask the CEO, you are involved in discussions, and I just wanted to get that on the record because this is a crisis and we are addressing it, and just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Supervisor, through the chair, yes, that's correct. Before the holidays, Human Resources, Labor, and my office had met several times. We met during the holidays with the DSA, and we just regrouped internally, HR and myself, this week, spending 2 to 3 hours and trying to come up with different ideas and solutions. And the sheriff and I actually had lunch yesterday to talk about some of those. So yes, everyone is continuing to work on it. It is a good sign that the sheriff is almost going to be fully filling his law enforcement deputies, and so we're hoping that custody will follow soon.
And we have budget money to deal with whatever the results of your negotiations turn out to be.
We'll be working on that, your board, and that would be a closed session on labor negotiations upcoming.
And I just put one correction. We don't have enough budgeted for whatever that comes out of that discussion. We have some budgeted for incentives for staffing, and of course we have the 2 million set aside of 172. If the sheriff is able to fill all these all these patrol deputy positions, so that the undersheriff can begin overhiring, so that we maintain our staffing levels, and so that money is still available. Mr. Lavanillo.
Yes, and another bit of good news. Santa Maria PD is actually going to be fully staffed within the next month or two. So that's another good sign that people are coming back to the profession, and also that if our other partner agencies are fully staffed, limits where an interested party would want to go. So,
Supervisor Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Williams, and I want to thank Supervisor Hartman for highlighting what's going on with the Sheriff's Department and making sure that we were addressing that custody deputy issue. During the workshops, I was in favor of some of these additional positions being added, and whether it gets done through this cycle, hopefully through the overhire, we can then, once the overhire happens, then we can make those permanent, would be the vision I might see if it's not going to get done through this budget cycle by adding these positions, that might be a mechanism to begin to restore the Sheriff's Department. I mean, population has grown considerably since the Great Recession, and having that being down that many sworn positions is going to be a crisis. No matter what we do with the criminal justice system, just because criminal justice system is being improved doesn't necessarily mean that public safety is being improved. It does have an impact, but there are a lot of other concerns out there that do need resources, especially within the Sheriff's Department, the District Attorney's Office, to address the crime that's in our community, which is significant right now, especially in the North County and Santa Maria and Lompoc valleys, where it's often somewhat of a war zone, not just with the violent crime, but also with the drug trade, which is impacting our children and our families, as the sheriff has highlighted. So definitely a huge concern moving forward, and wanting to make sure that we make appropriate investments there. I think it's our highest calling.
Supervisor Capps.
Thank you. Just wanted to thank Supervisor Lavanino for bringing up the point about when those held positions in this department will be addressed, because I understand one area that is not lacking in staff is our public defender's office. They've done an amazing job of being so fully staffed that they need some supervisors, and that has been imparted quite adequately to us, I believe, during the hearings of how important those positions are. So I just wanted to give a plug for those positions eventually. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to policy and executive.
Thank you, Chair Williams. This is our final functional group. Consists of the Board of Supervisors, Council, and the County Executive Office, as well as general county programs. Policy and Exec Group receives $113 million in GFC, $91 million of which goes to general county programs and is often passed through to other departments, including the Northern Branch Jail Operations funding, 18% funding, and cannabis funding. The group makes up less than $100 million of the county's total operating expenditures and is only 2% of total FTE at 107. The only update here is the data position transferred to IT that I mentioned on a prior slide. And here again are the expansions for this group, most of them being in general county programs, although the 18% growth and the cannabis swap funding will be passed through to multiple departments. And that concludes this functional group.
Any requests to speak?
Chair Williams and members of the board, we have one request to speak on this item, and that is E-Planet Thunderstriker. E-Planet?
So I was in Sylvang, and that's the first time I ever did public comments or interacting with politicians and stuff, a little over a year ago. So I gave a lot of information to Ms. Hartman's office. Now, a couple months before that, there was some issues here over at City Hall where the clerk for the council wouldn't accept any papers that it wasn't something like that. They didn't do something like that, either for public comment or just council specifically, you know, and did not refer me to the clerk. So then I came over here. I gave some papers to Mr. Hart's aides, and I saw the receptionist first time that day, who was hiding behind the door last November. And everyone saw me that day with the note, and I submitted this as public comments, my minute-by-minute notes that I'm making as I start my day, because I know the kind of person that I am, the society that we live in, that funny things are going to go down, and I'm going to be the person who's like, you know, the bad guy. So I'm writing things down. One of them is person hiding behind door. That was public comments, and all of these people could have seen that. They could hear me talking. They could be caring about their country. But what happens is I'm banned still. And my complaint related to that, it didn't go anywhere. I mean, you had to get the papers again. And I'm also going to point out that I'm the kind of person, I wanted to be a worldwide music producer promoting world peace, a global holiday specifically, and just prosperity. So I'm really very much unlike a lot of other people where money is not going to affect me at all. I'm not going to be happy. I could make all the money I need traveling around the world producing music, partying that way, and people will pay to come to party with me. So when I say I have to sue everybody, that's just garbage, because we could be consulting. We could be talking about women coming together for the benefit of women for a female president, which this country almost possibly has to have at this point. There's not going to be any respectable male running for president that's going to be able to do anything. It's going downhill, and we're here in this little bubble in this room talking about all these other things, ignoring the most important things that are affecting our children and the rest of America and pretty much the whole world, because and so it's like, you know, so and
Thank you.
And that concludes public comment on this functional group.
Then we will move on to board deliberation decision-making. Attachment E process.
Yep. So this next slide is just the reconciliation of how we get to the 425,000 that is remaining, and we can put up the attachment E spreadsheet and begin deliberations.
Any comments or questions from the board? Supervisor Hartman.
Oh, I forgot to mention community services, and that is the Women's Commission. They currently have 6,000 to operate. They would like 15,000 so that they can do more in-reach into the various community organizations. So I just wanted to put that on the table.
That's a difference of 9,000 over the recommended budget?
Yes.
So
For my
Supervisor.
part, go ahead.
Go ahead. Just supervisors, that we have this on the screen. Mr. Yee will be doing this. As you see, that was as we've done every year, there's 425 that's not allocated, and we pre-populated. We're calling it the green tape ombudsman person. Should be ombudsman person, not ombudsman man, by the way. And so they've subtracted 50,000 from those that they heard had been in favor of that, and so it would bring the remaining one time to 375.
I'm also cool if you just put ombudswoman down there. For my part, I'll just say that, I think it is appropriate that in the recommended budget, there is some set aside for sustainability initiatives. This is an incredibly large and important task to reach the county's share of our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. Should be a countywide effort. As large as our previous attempts to bring us together moving in one direction, like Renew 22. And so I just think that the electrification specialist is an important position. I think and in my view, putting it on top of the set aside is important because just like much of the work that the county can do on GHG reduction is capital expenses, I could see that money, the set aside going very quickly if it includes some capital expenses. I'm trying to think of how people could think of the other side. If it was all positions, I could see that might be plenty of money for it. But my view is we need to not only have positions to do the work, but we also need to have money available for those positions to recommend actual actions. And so, I think it's important for us to make a strong marker on the sustainability work. Supervisor Hartman?
I just had a question. So are you thinking of it at the 160 or the 50,000?
I would prefer 160 just so that we know we have it for multiple years, but I could understand if we do it for less. But again, if we did it for 50, then they'd have enough from July 1 to July 1, and it just seems weird because right now we are basically deciding on something, and next year we'll decide at this time whether to extend that position or not. So I would like them to have at least some to get past July 1 of next year. Supervisor Nelson?
Yeah, so specifically to this question, this issue, where those funds come from, we have a $500,000 set aside, and as far as capital is concerned, we have been spending significant amount of capital dollars in our CIP and in general services for electric vehicle infrastructure, solar infrastructure throughout the county, and so those keep showing up on our CIP lists constantly, and so I don't think I'm at this point comfortable. I think that $500,000 is sufficient. We still haven't got the climate action plan items come before us. I think that's a good marker. I think that $500,000 can absorb that whole $160,000 this year. And I know that the desire to push that higher. I know that's something that's a priority for the chair and for other supervisors. I just think it may be premature, and we are making significant investments in those places. And so I'm not there yet for the additional funds out of this 425 for that.
Supervisor Hartman.
Would you be for 50 and then some of the cushion came out of the 500?
Potentially. I'm still on the fence right now on where I'm at with the budget. I've got a list of my pros and my cons, and that'll be part of my final deliberations and votes. But yeah, that's definitely a compromise that I think would get us a little bit further and make sure there's more funds available for things like green tape, ombudsman, as well as potential projects in our individual districts. I think one of the concepts here on these emerging issues is there might be some funds left to enhance the $280,000 that we're going to be making available for in-district projects that we're going to have with some additional flexibility on. My hope is that we leave as much of that possible so that we have that flexibility. And so the more money we spend out of the 425, the less that's available for us to do work within our individual districts. And so that's where I'm working my way through the decision-making process.
Supervisor Capps.
Well, I certainly want to weigh in on the prioritization, how it all fits with the 450. I want to see how this shakes out, whether it's 50 at a minimum or the 160, but certainly I share the chair's urgency about the climate crisis. We know we have a decade, thanks to the scientific community, to work, and so electrification is certainly the way to go, and we have a lot of work to do, including our own buildings. So put me down for sure, at least 50, if not the 160. Thanks.
Paul, can you put that just in a bigger font? I didn't bring my glasses today, and I'm sitting in the middle seat over here, so I'm the farthest from both screens. Thank you, because it's just a big bunch of blurry numbers to me. So would it be useful to you if each of us just goes down and confirms all the things we would like in our column?
Yes, Chair Williams, that would be preferred.
Okay.
Are there any other topics so we know before we say how we want to allocate?
Well, I think I heard Mr. Nelson suggest that some of it be put in district-specific accounts, so we could put that down as district projects.
So let me throw out a number on that just to, have that conversation. We have 280,500 available right now, already set aside as part of the budget. An additional, was that 219,500 would actually get each district $100,000 for potential projects in their district. And so maybe throw that down. There's a number that still would be a balance. And if there are excess funds, I think we should consider distributing it that way or hold it back for the CEO to consider later on throughout the year as other, I think it's 219.5, former math teacher.
Okay, well, let's just go. I will say I absolutely think 9,000 more for the Women's Commission is a no-brainer, and it brings up the idea that, in my view, eventually we should start providing stipends for at least some of the, design review boards or other things, because it's just weird that we have a system so reliant on people spending long hours without any even symbolic remuneration. So 9,000 for the Women's Commission. I would put down 160,000 for the electrification, or how about I will put down the 50 that they would need for this year, and I would put down 80 more, so 120, so that we would have funding for a year and a half for that, just so that we can see some continuity. And then the green tape at 50,000, I agree with, and I would put the remaining balance in the district projects. Yeah, actually, you can just make it for ease, mirror the 219. Paul.
Then you have money left over.
And that should go into our emerging issues. Yep. We might need that for a match with some health entity or a Or the sheriff's department might do a great job of overhiring and need more than 2 million.
Chair Williams?
Yes.
So I would match that.
Mr. Lavanino?
And the 122.
Yeah, it's always funny that it's a $1.4 billion budget and we're talking about $9,000, but who's picking up lunch, you know? Yeah, I'm fine matching the 9,000 for the Women's Commission. Appreciate all that they do. And I think the rest into district projects. The electrification specialist, I agree, is something that's important, but we've been setting aside money for climate action programs for a long time. The rest, if I have any balance, would just go to emerging issues.
Supervisor
So
Capps.
I'd be the 219.5 or whatever that is for district, and then the rest just into fund balance.
Supervisor Capps.
Well, I'd be remiss not to also be supportive of the 9,000 for the Women's Commission, having been served as president of that commission way back when. And but yeah, I'll follow suit with my colleagues, Supervisor Hartman and Supervisor Williams, with the rest of the allocations.
Mr. Nelson.
Yes, so I'm going to go ahead and have, add the 9,000 for the Women's Commission as well. We'll make that unanimous. And I think I'll stop there. I do think we're going to be funding, having sufficient funding there for the electrification specialist somewhere else. So I'll leave that blank at this point and have the rest come into emerging issues. And I think that's actually the beauty of the Emerging Issues Fund is if in fact, we did need additional funds for that, it could be pulled for that for an electrification specialist. So, you know, is it now or is it later really is what kind of the question that we're having here. I'm okay with later, so I'm not going to add that onto my list at this point. And if I could, I'd like to make some comments on where I'm going on my ultimate vote on our budget, if that's appropriate, because I think that.
Well, let's just confirm with Mr. Clementi that it's obvious here what the motion would be. It would be to fund the recommended budget, and in addition, 9,000 for the Women's Commission, 120,000 for the electric EV specialist, 50,000 for the green tape project, and 219,000 for district project. 219.5.
So Chair Williams, the far left column with numbers on it is where we are loading what's going to be sort of what we see consensus on, and the electrification specialist at the moment we have at 50,000. Supervisor Capps gave us 50,000 during her comments.
Just to clarify your comments, and I think she said to just
To increase it, yes, exactly. I said minimum 50, so I'm.
So we'll get that change
Thank you.
in, and we see 50,000 for the green tape ombudsman, 9,000 for Women's Commission. It'll be 120,000 for the electrification specialist.
Yeah, so wait for Mr. Yu to catch up. So Supervisor Capps' column should look like Supervisors Williams and Hartman's column.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that will leave 26,500 that stays in emerging issues.
Mr. Nelson.
Yes, thank you, Chair Williams. I've gone back and forth over the last month and even today on whether I would be voting for our budget today. You know, this is a collaborative effort as a board. We all work together, and then even at the end, we still may disagree. And so today, as I was going through the budget hearings, I was wrestling with it, and I kind of made a list of things I like about our budget and things I don't like about our budget. And you know, some of the things that I'm still frustrated about, you know, I don't love that we're polling for tax measures. I am frustrated on what I would consider disproportionate investment in capital geographically. It's something I highlighted during the workshop, and I think it's something that we should continue to look at over the year next year. Tio Miyasato has been talking to me about maybe trying to do a better needs assessment in portions of the North County that might need some additional investment. So I'm confident that we're going to be moving forward with that. I've been an advocate for continuing funding of our law enforcement, especially our Sheriff's Department. I do think that we need to be spending more there, but we have been putting money aside as a board, and we do have money aside for overhire, and we are continuing to look at solving the custody deputy position. So I think it is a little premature to be adding those positions without the next step. But as soon as we resolve some of those things, I am right there to add additional positions to the Sheriff's Department in patrol and in custody if necessary to solve some of these problems. I just think it's not today. And so with that, I went through the list of things I did really like about our budget. You know, $44 million strategic reserve is significant. There's not a lot of jurisdictions that show the fiscal prudence that we have. And that's a strategic reserve that we have had through disaster after disaster, and we keep leaving that fully funded. And I think that that should be noted, that our budget staff continues to find resources. Our Public Works Department and others, and our Office of Emergency Management borrow down and work with our federal and state partners to make sure that we're reimbursed as a county so that that can stay healthy and really is available when needed. The $46.1 million towards homelessness services, and that's just not just capital with big projects like we have in, you know, in Santa Maria or in Goleta on some of our villages that we're building out, but also intense case management to really stem the tide that we have and really get these people that are chronically homeless onto the next level. I'm really proud of the IT department, being a fully functional department moving forward. And then, you know, one of the items that is, you know, I'm going to probably always be a no vote if we don't get there, is maintaining our PCI. It's something that I have been big on for my 11 years working at this board. 3 as supervisor and 8 as staff, to making sure that we're fully funding that, not debt financing our budgets by deferring that maintenance. We're doing that here. I'm also hearing that we're going to have still flexibility to have an ongoing discussion about future pods in our jail situation, that we're not fully set and we're not going to predispose a limited amount of jail cells or jail beds through this budget process. So knowing that those things are still available for me, at this point, I'm comfortable with moving forward with the budget as presented. I think the budget staff has done an amazing job. I mean, Paul, you are crushing it out there. And just to see you fully embrace this position and own this budget is really neat to see. And so I'm proud to vote for it, and hoping I'm joining the rest of you.
I want to just agree that I think there is real reasons for optimism and to be proud of this budget. I think that all departments have contributed significantly to it by both what they've asked for and what they have not asked for. You know, tell you, serving in the legislature under Governor Brown was both exhilarating and sometimes occasionally frustrating when I wanted to start a new program or fund something more, because he had a real restraint, and he had a restraint from a perspective of compassion, which is that we want to make our work sustainable, that year to year, that we don't just start something and then drop the ball on it. And so I think all departments, by showing discretion about what they ask for and what they don't ask for, contribute to how we are able to offer the public services at a sustainable pace. There were some major minefields that we had to pay for. You know, not the least of which, you know, I mean, this wasn't even the biggest one, but was the increased pension cost, which, if you looked at that slide on many years, that would have meant cuts, right? And it didn't, partially because of the restraint of departments and partially because of the misfortune of increasing property tax. Let us not be lulled into unawareness that that increase in our revenue is actually a sign of a great malaise in the community, which is rising home prices to the level where people cannot live here. So that's I think also something that I think we should have some optimism about, that we are increasingly as an organization aware that we need to build some housing ourselves so that we can sustainably staff our people in the future. And just the fact that it's a balanced budget in a year where most of our other jurisdictions are having to make significant cuts, not only other cities, but counties as well. And so I think that says a lot on how this board is making sure that we would have funds available if certain departments are able to meet staffing goals and needs. But maintaining, control of those funds so we make sure that it doesn't just go to more overtime. Any other, Mr. Lavanillo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I kind of wanted to piggyback on some of what Supervisor Nelson was talking about. Paul, your attention to detail and the ability to answer questions that were coming at you just, really let me know that you've got a really good, firm handle on this, and I really appreciate you stepping up. It's an amazing job in our first budget, so excellent. Yeah. And also, I want to congratulate Nancy. Our push to, and maybe this was done previously, but I barely figured it out like last year when you started really socking money away into future budgets. Because one of the things that was really disconcerting is, and I don't know how many people looked at it like this, but I sure did, was that we balanced because we have to, right? We always talk about, hey, we had a balanced budget. Well, we're constitutionally required to have a balanced budget, so it's gonna be balanced, but I think it's the fifth year in a row with no service level reductions and no cuts. And that's huge. Because a lot of people don't realize, I was glad you brought up Governor Brown, because a lot of people don't realize they looked, at him as a super liberal. And honestly, he was probably one of our most conservative financial governors that we've had. He did not want to get people's expectations up and then in future years cut. So I really appreciate the fact that now we're looking out 5 years and we're saying, okay, we've got to take money from this good year and make sure that we're covering those shortfalls in year 3, 4, and 5, so that we don't all sit here and say, hey, we had a balanced budget on June 15th and on June 18th into the next fiscal year, we're upside down already. So I think that's a really important way to look at it. And the county right now is in a state of change. It's in a state of flux. We have so many new department heads. A lot of people coming in, and this is their first budget or their second budget. And I just want you to know that first off, I appreciate you being here. I don't know if it's required or not, but maybe it is. But I think the reason why it is, if it is it's really important to see what other perspectives are out there. That, you sit up here, there's 5 of us, and it is an awesome job, and I love this job, but you're sitting here trying to balance all these very worthy priorities. And I started just jotting down, should we spend our limited funding on addressing homelessness, or spend more on the mental health crisis, or balance the scales of justice on both ends with the public defender and the district attorney with the needs that they have, or our pressing infrastructure needs, responding to recent storm damage, or make sure that our residents are safe in their community by making sure that patrol is out there, that when they are out in the community, they have a beautiful park to enjoy, or do we, same time make sure that we create a workplace that attracts new talent, and also for those that are working here to make sure that they're fairly compensated. The answer to all that is yes, we have to do all those things, right? And then deal with the next crisis that we don't know about that's going to happen next Wednesday. So just keep all that into perspective. I know not everybody got everything that they wanted, and I wish that we could. But I'll tell you what, if you did get everything you want, that there would be a wish list the next day of things that we need to do, because that's the nature of our jobs, is we're never going to have enough money to do all the things that we want to do or need to do. So it is setting priorities. And I think it's important for our residents to understand that 5 of us coming from completely different backgrounds, representing different areas of this community, coming from different philosophical and ideological backgrounds, agree that this document, where we're spending our money, which is a values document, is that we put our money where we feel, and the resources, the limited resources we have, in the best places possible, and we can all agree on that. So I really appreciate Supervisor Nelson coming along on this vote, because we have spent more money on infrastructure, capital improvement, the things that 4th District has generally talked about, you and your predecessor, of really have invested heavily in the future of our county. So I'm very comfortable where we are right now. I really want to thank my colleagues and my past colleagues for, there are so many pressures on us to spend money in areas that a certain segment of the population really wants us to attack. And like I said, balancing all those things is not easy. So thank you for not going beyond what our CEO has and our staff has told us is prudent to spend. Other places do that, and it ends up in chaos. So thank you. The fact that we have not only our strategic reserve fully funded, but we also have a healthy reserve inside of emerging issues. So I'll be happy to support this budget.
Supervisor Capps.
Thank you, Chair Williams. I wanted to start off by just thanking the public. This seems fast and swift today, but it's really because of all of the work that's gone on over the last year, but specifically over that budget workshop week, which was so powerful. The testimonies, there's been some today as well, but just again, to emphasize what Supervisor Lavanino said, budgets are value statements, the reflections of our priorities. It's hard to make these choices amongst very worthy causes. The public really has engaged in a way that is certainly new to me as a new supervisor, to see the level of detail, the passion. You know, I think back of highlights of that budget week of those advocating for more mental health. I was able to go tour the PUF this week, and became more real to me how urgent it is to put more of an emphasis on better facilities, which this budget's doing. Housing, number one, really the $46 million commitment that is so crucial, as we've seen with his mass evictions in our county. And so I'm really pleased that my colleagues supported $500,000 to an addition for rental assistance, so important as people are struggling to just to live, just to have four walls, one above, one below, and around them. So housing for me is such a key part of this, what we're doing here today. And then just our commitment to the climate. There's a lot more to do. We're going to hear about it with our climate action plan, but this budget really does lay a marker for picking up the pace. We have to pick up the pace. The scientists tell us we have a decade to do this kind of work. So I'm really pleased that we're moving in that direction. And I just want to thank the staff. This, again, has been my first budget process, and my chief of staff, Chris, told me that somehow Mona and Paul and the team just kind of put this all together and make it work. It's when you start the process of the week of workshops, it was not clear to me how this could ever sort of come together the way that it has, but lo and behold, they've done it again, and I'm grateful to be participant, not just a participant, but a strong supporter of this very strong budget. Thank you.
Supervisor Hartman.
I remember my first budget, and my stomach was tied in knots, and you feel like you come in to do battle. And it wasn't a very pleasant experience. I still have PTSD from that first year. So while I am really appreciative to all the department heads and all the people who built this budget, and the CEO and her staff, I'm especially proud and pleased and would like to thank my colleagues on the board, because we have broad consensus. And when you've got that, you can really accomplish things. And we are very prudent with our budget. And not only the reserves, and I agree with my colleague on the board, Supervisor Nelson, if you ignore your deferred maintenance, that's really deficit spending of another kind. And we're all agreed we're trying to make up for that over the long run across the board. But we're also putting aside reserve fundings for major systems. So we're really it's much easier to spend now and get credit, and that's what politicians tend to do. But we're really trying to think about the long term, some of the issues that we faced, and to make that not what our future supervisors and county employees have to face. So I'm very proud of this budget. I think the homeless commitment that we've made really stands out in my mind. It's a huge investment that we're making over multiple years, and there wasn't always agreement on that. And it's still an experiment, but we're giving it our very best. And if this doesn't work, I don't know what will, because we're really committed to this. And I'm also really eager to see how the mental health beds unfolds. I think that's related and one of our next big challenges. If we don't want to pay more for incarceration, we've got to make this work. And that's kind of the test of this budget, I think. So I'm glad that it's going to be a unanimous budget, because I think that's really sends a message. And again, I'm just very proud and pleased to serve as a member of this board.
Can I get a motion?
Supervisors, just for the record, we want to just what's on the screen, we are passing it out to you as for the record. It's attachment E, and so that will be part of your recommended actions to approve attachment E. The clerk is just distributing it so that we are sure we are meeting all requirements. And once she distributes it and has copies in the back.
So the motion would be recommended actions A through H with the numbers in the passed out attachment E, if someone can make that motion. And that we need two motions. We need one for the county budget, and we need another for the successor agency.
I'll move items A through H.
With attachment E.
With attachment E, with the highlighted yellow and the offsetting magenta. If that works.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And then the second motion is for the successor agency. Can I get a motion for staff recommendation for the successor agency?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you. We do have one thing, which is general public comment. Is there general public comment?
Chair Williams and members of the board, yes, we have one request to speak on general public comment, and we are going to E-Planet Thunderstriker. E-Planet?
So I made a lot of comments before at the budget workshop, and I noticed an action summary that had my name in, and I was really excited because that's some public acknowledgement of me. But it said I was making a request for fraud in the music industry, and I don't even know if you guys would a request for an investigation would investigate for something like that. But it's like, well, it could have been a request for investigation for what was going on with risk management. And so I don't know if an investigation was started. My guess is probably not. The reason that may have been in there is to placate some of these people who might be a little bit gullible that somebody actually did something based on what I was talking about, or the reason why they actually didn't do something. And I'm just not really sure what to think at this point, because I'm going to leave here. I'm not going to expect anything from you guys, so I'm not going to be waiting for any questions or comments or answers. If there's an investigation as to why I had to bring 35 pages and deliver them today because they didn't go part of my claim. Because the problem is that if that investigation did start, it would go immediately to the top of the last 3 administrations, because the music industry is not like in the 50s where they blacklisted people for communism, for the benefit of America so that people wouldn't be talking about communism in their songs or in the movies, because then we went to crime. I mean, America was a developing country. That's why we used to have a lot of babies, like the Hispanics, which are doubling. But nowadays, now it's like, well, they can sing about crime if they want to, you know. So
Thank you, and I just want you to know that we all now all have a photocopy of the document along with the Sheriff's Department's response, okay? And the timestamp of this morning at 9:51. Thank you. We are adjourned to June 27th in Santa Maria. June 20th in Santa Barbara.